hour of the Mark Cox Show. Lots going on. Got William Lajeunesse from Fox lined up here shortly to talk about how in the world California, which can't pay its bills as it is planning to institute a single-payer healthcare system. Maybe they'll single-handedly fix climate change while they're at it because they do have Governor Moonbeam out there. So you just never know. Anything could happen. Also this hour, wanted to mention the fact that Chesterfield has apparently turned down that sports complex that we talked so much about, the one that Dan Buck and the others were pushing for, and Mike Matheny. In fact, we had the manager on the show talking about it, and there were some steps the city of Chesterfield needed to take, and they apparently didn't feel like the investment group had met a couple of deadlines, so they voted against it and declared the contract for the project void. Would have been a big sports complex out in the Chesterfield Valley, so now you got to wonder if they're not going to be looking around for maybe another venue, or maybe they'll get it worked out. Maybe they're just negotiating. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, right now I want to switch gears a little bit. I've got a little more sound from the president's press briefing today with Sean Spicer. A lot of it focused on London. A lot of it focused on whether or not the president's lost confidence in Jeff Sessions. We'll get to all of that and more here on the show before the end of the hour. Also, I had encouraged you before to go to Twitter, to at Tony Colombo 971, at Mark Cox 971. Very, very fitting as we do that because the Twitter poll is, of course, dealing with these issues today. And it is because the president does tweet a lot, but he also tweeted that we need the travel ban for an extra level of safety in light of what's happened in London and now today in near the Notre Dame Cathedral in France. Do you agree with him? Is he right? That's the question you need to look at. So go to at Mark Cox 971, at Tony Colombo 971. We'll have the results coming up for you here at the end of this hour. So be sure and stick around for that. Let's talk about education in Missouri and whether or not we're doing all we can to help our kids succeed. Brandon Wright is our guest right now from the Thomas Fordham Institute, where they focus on advancing educational excellence. Thomas, Brandon, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Hey, thanks for giving me some time today.
Thanks for having me on.
So we've talked a lot about education and performance. We've obviously got pretty good performing districts in some areas in the state and others that have teetered on the brink of being unaccredited. Where do you guys see the opportunity for improvement?
So a big area pertains to a document that the state will submit to the U.S. Department of Education in September as part of its obligations under the new federal education law, the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Right.
This act replaced No Child Left Behind a little over a year ago, and every state has to submit this document that covers its plans over a number of areas like testing, accountability, and how to improve their lowest performing schools. So
before you move forward, very quickly, for because there was a lot of focus here about not only No Child Left Behind, but some of the other education things that have come down from Washington recently. How is this different? How is this new program different than No Child Left Behind?
So to my eye, one of the greatest things about the new law is finally, for the first time in 20-some years, it gives a lot of autonomy back to states and school districts to decide for themselves what's best for their schools, which obviously makes a lot of sense because they're the ones who are actually there. They're the ones who know their families, their students, their values, and their needs. So whereas under No Child Left Behind, the federal government had a lot of say in terms of what happened at every school, the standards they had to meet, the tests they had to take, et cetera, this law gives a lot more power back to the state. So that, in my eye, is a really great move. It was essentially a bipartisan choice, too, because No Child Left Behind ultimately was so ineffective for so many years. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. So we're suspicious of these things, though, because we're always told we're going to give you more freedom to do what you want, and then we find out that the school boards either aren't doing what we want or they weren't as free to do it as we thought, particularly under the previous administration. So it strikes me that they were sending down mandates to districts on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, so the new Trump and DeVos education administration is not that way at all. They've given every indication that they'll be extremely deferential. They'll do what they have to do under the law, but no more. And so the big challenge, I think, isn't whether they actually have the autonomy they're said to have. The big question is, will states and school districts actually take advantage of the autonomy? And what we're seeing, because 16 states and D.C. have already submitted plans during the first deadline. There was an April one, and then there was a second one in September.
Okay.
What these plans generally show is that because I think these states aren't used to having this freedom, they don't really know what to do with it. So they're just kind of maintaining the status quo. And as I said, the status quo under No Child Left Behind wasn't effective. So that's a big problem. And that's actually what I think leads to the problem with the plan that Missouri seems like is going to submit in September, that it just isn't taking advantage of the freedom it now has.
Yeah, I guess the other program I was referring to was Common Core, which claimed to allow you more flexibility at the local level. So specifically here in the time we have left, what would Missouri have to put in this document that it turns in to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction? I mean, is it up to the individual district, or is it up to the government down Jeff City to get it done?
So I think it's in some ways both. The state needs to affirmatively give a menu of options to school districts, essentially telling them that they can in fact do these things,
okay,
and then allowing the school district to choose from them. Essentially, what we're saying in terms of turning around lowest performing schools is changing who's in charge of these schools. You can do that at the school level, the local level, or at the state level. The easiest way to do it at the school level is to convert or replace the school with a charter school. Now, that's not a very big thing in the state at the moment. There are less than 100 charter schools in the entire state.
Right.
The numbers have doubled, I think, over the last 5-10 years, but it's still not a ton. I wish that would expand, but another very local option is essentially taking control of the schools away from the regular district who currently has control over them, instead replacing them with a sort of local leadership team with expertise in schools, giving them more cash and sort of more autonomy, sort of a pseudo charter approach, actually. And we've seen that work in other places across the country. At the state level, it's called a state turnaround school district. Essentially, the state picks and chooses low-performing schools across the state and puts them under this sort of school district that they run. We've seen this work really well in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. So all three of these options have proven effective elsewhere in the country.
Well, yeah.
And
that's good. We're talking to Brandon Wright from the Thomas Fordham Institute. The interesting thing about that is in St. Louis, we took away the authority of the school board and we had an appointed board because it was obvious that the local board was not making the best decisions on how to fix the problems. The unions played a role in that because they didn't want the bad teachers or the people that were perceived to be bad teachers. They were protected by the unions and they couldn't be removed. I mean, these problems are at several levels. So if you bring charters in, is it just a matter of more competition? Because I've long been a fan of vouchers. I think vouchers would change everything because these local districts would suddenly they'd have to compete or they wouldn't get to keep the cash.
Yeah, so I think school choice in general is a positive step, be it charters or school vouchers. On the charter front, competition plays a big role in how they improve schools, but because they're also given a lot more autonomy, they can sort of work as like R&D labs where they're trying, where they have the freedom to try new things with different kids and we then see what can work. They also can just replace bad schools.
Right.
So those are essentially the three ways I think charters can improve district schools. But allowing poor kids to also use school vouchers to attend private schools they otherwise couldn't afford is also a good step.
So what's the name of the new education program again?
The Every Student Succeeds Act?
Every Student Succeeds Act. So that's what you need to call your people need to call their state legislators and the governor's office and let them know. Put some pressure on them to make sure that some action gets taken before this deadline comes up.
Yep, exactly.
Very good. Brandon Wright, thanks for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. And, of course, he's with the Thomas Fordham Institute, which is edexcellence.net, if you want to read a little more about them. They clearly are a school choice organization, and they believe Missouri has an opportunity to help its educational process here before this deadline happens. So I know a lot of people feel strongly about that, particularly from the educators' point of view. All right, 314-9